Don't, don't look at what's in front of you.
The return of one of the most iconic horror thriller franchises in modern cinema, with 28 years later, has stirred a wave of anticipation across fans of both apocalyptic cinema and deeply human storytelling. As the third installment in a series that began with 28 Days Later and was followed by 28 Weeks Later, this new chapter arrives not just as a continuation, but as a bold reinvention, one that seeks to reflect how the world itself has changed in the decades since the original outbreak of the rage virus. With the passage of nearly 30 years both in the narrative and in real-world time, the opportunity to craft a story that explores long-term societal collapse, the persistence of human resilience, and the consequences of biological experimentation is immense. The sheer title, 28 Years Later, implies a significant time jump, one that invites questions about what remnants of civilization remain, how people have adapted to the new normal, and whether the rage virus has evolved or resurfaced in an even more terrifying form. The decision to revive this particular franchise now seems more meaningful than ever. In a post-pandemic global atmosphere where disease, quarantine, and government mistrust have become lived experiences for many, a film like 28 Years Later doesn't just echo science fiction fears, it reflects real-world anxieties. What was once speculative has become familiar, and that shift will undoubtedly inform the tone, characters, and themes of this upcoming film. It's highly probable that the creative minds behind it are using this opportunity not only to frighten and thrill, but to comment on the very fabric of society, survival, and what it means to be human in the face of relentless biological terror. There's every reason to believe the story won't just revisit old locations or characters, but will introduce new faces who were shaped by a world that's never known peace, only infection, fear, and desperation. One of the most compelling aspects to anticipate about 28 Years Later is how it will address the continuity of the previous films while establishing its own identity. The first movie was a raw, gritty, and deeply emotional tale of survival that focused on small human moments within a decaying world. It didn't rely on massive action set pieces, but instead used silence, tension, and atmosphere to create dread. The second film, 28 Weeks Later, expanded the scope, showing how governments and military forces tried and failed to reestablish control. That film was larger in scale, more action-driven, and introduced the concept of asymptomatic carriers, which added a new level of danger. Now, with this third installment, the question is, has the virus continued to shape the world, or has humanity changed in more horrifying ways than the virus itself ever could? Have the infected evolved, or has humanity regressed in the absence of order? It's very likely that the world depicted in 28 Years Later is not just a wasteland of overgrown ruins and abandoned cities, but a patchwork of isolated communities, rogue factions, and possibly even scientific enclaves that either work to reverse the damage or embrace it for their own purposes. There could be survivors who were born after the outbreak and have no memory of what the world was like before. These individuals might view the infected as a force of nature, something that simply is, like weather or famine. Their values, their fears, and their desires would be shaped not by hope of restoring the past, but by adapting to a savage, unpredictable present. This creates a deep well of potential character drama, as older survivors cling to fading memories, while the younger generation questions whether those memories are even worth preserving. One of the biggest unknowns surrounding 28 Years Later is whether any of the original characters will return. The emotional core of the first film rested largely on the journey of a small group of survivors, particularly Jim, played with haunting vulnerability and eventual grit by Cillian Murphy. If he or others were to return, it would not just be fan service. It would offer a bridge between the emotional themes of the original and the broader societal implications of the new story. An older Jim, hardened by decades of survival, could serve as a mentor, a leader, or even a tragic figure who represents the cost of long-term endurance. He might have formed a community, tried to raise a family, or lost everything along the way. His presence could also help anchor the audience emotionally amid the likely chaos and destruction that defines this next chapter. In terms of visual storytelling, the filmmakers will face the challenge and opportunity of portraying a world that's been ravaged for nearly 3 decades. Unlike the early days of infection shown in the previous films, this landscape will be one of long-term decay. Nature will have reclaimed urban environments, roads will be cracked and overgrown, and what little infrastructure remains may be crumbling or cannibalized for survival purposes. There is beauty in decay, and the juxtaposition of quiet, hauntingly. Abandoned spaces with sudden explosions of violence has always been a hallmark of this series. The cinematography will likely reflect that contrast. Wide, empty vistas pierced by brief, intense moments of terror, chase, or confrontation. The infected themselves could be reimagined in this chapter. While the original depiction of the Rage virus focused on sheer speed and uncontrollable violence, 28 years later might explore how the virus has changed over time. Are there different strains now? Are some infected more intelligent or capable of working in rudimentary packs? Could there be hybrids or creatures that blur the line between human and infected in disturbing ways? If certain groups have experimented on the virus, perhaps trying to control it, weaponize it, or cure it, they may have inadvertently created new monstrosities. These possibilities open the door to horrifying new encounters, each more disturbing than the last, and they ensure the threat remains fresh and unpredictable. Another layer that could be introduced is the moral complexity of survival in a world with no clear rules. In previous films, the biggest threats often turned out to be other humans, not just the infected. Military leaders, desperate survivors, and individuals with twisted ideals have shown how quickly ethics collapse under pressure. In 28 years later, we might see fully realized human factions with ideologies built around infection. Some might worship the infected, seeing them as the next step in evolution. Others might enslave them, using them as weapons or tools. Some might claim to be rebuilding civilization but rule through fear, secrecy, or authoritarianism. Each of these dynamics could test the loyalties and beliefs of the main characters, forcing them to make painful choices about who to trust, what to fight for, and what they are willing to become in order to survive. In terms of pacing and structure, the film may opt for a slow-burn approach at first, introducing the world through small-scale moments before slowly widening the scope. Perhaps we begin with a single isolated character or a small community and gradually learn how the world has changed. Maybe a new outbreak begins, more devastating than the last. Or perhaps the virus was never truly eradicated, merely dormant, waiting for the right conditions to surge again. There might be a scientific discovery that suggests a way to finally cure it, or a terrible mistake that reintroduces it to a new region. These narrative beats would allow the film to play with suspense, uncertainty, and dread, keeping audiences on edge as they try to piece together what has happened over the past 28 years. There is also the possibility that the film may span multiple locations and narratives. We might follow parallel storylines, one group in a remote rural village, another in the ruins of a major city, and a third traveling between zones of infection and safety. These interwoven plots could eventually converge, building to a climax that ties together themes of isolation, community, betrayal, and hope. If done well, this structure could create a rich tapestry of survival stories, each with its own emotional stakes and dangers, and together painting a fuller picture of the world's state. Technologically, the film could also address what remains of humanity's tools. Are there drones still in the air, surveilling zones? Have satellites been repurposed to track outbreaks? Are there underground labs powered by scavenged generators where scientists or bioengineers continue working in secret? Or has humanity devolved into pre-industrial levels of survival, with technology seen as a luxury or even a threat? The interplay between high-tech remnants and low-tech survivalist tactics would give the film a unique visual and thematic edge, showcasing both what has been lost and what endures.